Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He's in charge of $122 billion in state pension funds. He created a firestorm over Wall Street bonuses and executive pay. And he's been the bearer of bad news. Tens of thousands of jobs lost in 2008, some 250,000 more expected in 2009. And he's running for the office he now holds in 2010 for the first time. He's Thomas DiNapoli, the Comptroller of the state of New York. And he's here to talk state budget, city budget, Wall Street, Main Street, executive pay, recession, job loss. Oy. Before being chosen as Comptroller, Mr. DiNapoli represented the 16th Assembly District in northwestern Nassau County, and he served for 20 years. During his tenure in the Assembly, Mr. DiNapoli chaired the Local Governments Committee, the Governmental Operations Committee, and the Environmental Conservation Committee. Welcome, Mr. Comptroller.
Doug, nice to be here.
Sir, you've certainly caused a great deal of agita, particularly on Wall Street. Your January 28th release and analysis just blew the lid off this executive compensation. Talk about the study, what it found, and let's talk about its impact.
Well, the Comptroller's Office does lots of things. One thing that we do is look at economic trends. That data, that information is important in any year, but certainly in a year like we've been going through, where the budgets are, in such a tough shape on the city level, on the state level. We want to provide policymakers, be it city council members or state legislators, governors and mayors, with up-to-date information. And we've been tracking over a number of years the bonus payouts from Wall Street and financial services. Why? We get a lot of revenue from Wall Street.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it.
20% at the state level, 12% at the city level. These are big bucks.
Big dollars. And a lot of it comes in at the end of the year when the bonuses are paid out. So with everything going on, no surprise we projected last year that there'd be a continued contraction in the bonus pool. Trying to get a number on that, a handle on it, though, becomes important. With our analysis, we projected a 44% decline in the bonus pool for this year compared to last year. It still, though, resulted in $18.4 billion.
Right, and this is an industry that lost $35 billion, and they paid 18. I'm ticked. Yeah. I'm angry.
Well, you're in good company. President Obama expressed the outrage that you just...
The day after. It's outrageous. It's shameful. I mean, you really did create a firestorm, and in fact, the president on February 4th issued an executive pay cap.
And I think that's what people wanted to hear in response to our report. They were outraged, just as you said, Doug. They lost billions and billions of dollars. Worse than that, the impact on everyone, the impact on Main Street because of the meltdown on Wall Street has been severe. And yet people hear the word bonuses and they're saying, wait a minute. And it's not just the bonuses. It's, it's the new corporate jet. It's going to the fancy conferences.
It's fixing your office for $1 million bucks while we're getting my money.
It's all of that. It's the golden parachutes when the institution fails and you get out, making, so much money. The average bonus we projected to be at $112,000. The median income for a New York State family is $50,000. So, the numbers are, of great concern. I mean, that being said, Wall Street has always been a high-paying enterprise. And again, we tax those folks.
And they generate, as we pointed out, a lot of money.
We estimated, part of our report, besides projecting that that bonus payout of our $18 billion, is because of the drop year to year, we saw a revenue loss of about $1 billion. So it does, it cuts both ways. It's a double-edged sword. But if we're at a time where we want to have credibility restored to the financial system and we want it to be stabilized and functioning in the right way, and here's really the key point of it. With TARP and the other kinds of federal interventions, really taxpayers, because of the federal money, we're now investors in some of these institutions.
Is this a good investment?
Well, it's a problematic investment. We'll get profitable at some point in the future, but as investors, we have a right to have an input. And so I certainly think the cap on executive compensation the president is proposing, and I'm sure Congress will support whatever the final version of it is, that's an appropriate investor response to an industry that certainly needs to be tightened up in many ways. There needs to be more transparency. There certainly needs to be a revitalization of a regulatory framework. The prior administration provided no oversight, that mattered. And you know, we need to go back to a notion. We don't want to strangle the industry. We need Wall Street to be making money again. Right. But you know, we need to save Wall Street from itself. And the only way you can do that is by opening the books and having the kind of robust oversight that I think those that created the SEC and the other regulatory entities had anticipated.
Right. What I found interesting in the reaction to your report was the effect of statewide elected official. In your case, the Comptroller. In Andrew Cuomo's case, in Elliot Spitzer's case, the Attorney General, sort of taking the lead on national policy and national issues, you know, federalism in action. Talk about the power, duties, prerogatives of the state control. What do you do?
Well, it's a good question. It's one I'm asked a lot because, you know, folks, even when I got the job, the family said, what exactly is a controller? Is it a comptroller? Is it a comptroller? How do you spell it? And, you know, some of the press in New York insists that it's C-O-N, you know.
T-R-O-N?
Yeah, some are C-O-M-P, whatever. We do a lot.
You're the C-O-M-P.
Well, you know, legally on the ballot, it's C-O-M-P. It comes from the French, supposedly, whatever.
And in New York City, Comptroller is the same. Go ahead.
Right.
Now that we've got etymology.
You know, the job is divided up in other states in different ways. In New York, we've kind of put a lot together in the position. You know, I'm the chief auditor, you know, for the state. So in other words, we provide the oversight in terms of looking at state agencies, how they spend money, public authorities,
school boards,
and local governments. So I was just going to say, local governments, school districts, cities, counties, towns, villages, special districts.
And you found a lot of stuff wrong and lots of money out there. School district report I just read. They're not spending money and they're raising taxes.
Well, some districts were building up reserves and stranding taxpayer money in reserves that they never need the money, you know, for what they put it in the reserve for. At the same time, they were raising taxes. But also other cases of inefficiency, waste. And we try with our audits to do a couple things. Obviously, when we find something wrong, point it out, shine a bright light. Sometimes we refer our findings to the district attorneys and there's criminal action. We also try to say, you know what, there are better ways to do things. And we try to document best practices because we want to help the local officials do a better job, you know, or the state officials. So it is a combination of you know, carrying that stick, but at the same time, you know, also trying to be helpful, recognizing that we need to be a partner in government as well. And that's a fine line to walk. But
we public administration background.
Exactly.
Okay,
right.
So you do auditing. What else?
Well, we you know, you mentioned the pension fund, you know, at the outset. You know, I'm the trustee for the New York State Common Retirement Fund. That's state workers and municipal workers outside of New York City. It could be state workers in New York City as well. Police and fire outside of New York City. So we have over 1 million members. That's active employees and retirees and beneficiaries. The fund was valued at the end of last year at about $153.9 billion. We've had a rough year, as everybody's had.
So we
value the fund and we audit it on March 31st. So our preliminary estimate, and I got to couch it that way, is, you know, we're down about 20%, so about $120, $122 billion. More than enough to pay for the pensions, you know, for your viewers who have a state pension. It's guaranteed by the Constitution, and we still have plenty of money for the foreseeable future. And we are, you know, long-term investors. We have a perpetual horizon, and we do anticipate there'll be down years. We didn't anticipate a year to be down as much as this year's been.
And then perhaps next year and the year after.
09 is troublesome as well. But, you know, because of our strong performance leading into the downturn, we were fully funded. Many public pension plans haven't been. I think that's going to enable us to weather the storm. In fact, last year we were able to cut the contribution rates, the money that the government employers pay in, for the 5th year in a row. Now, after a year like this, I'm sure the rate will start to go up. But again, because we average out, you know, over time, you know, again, we're in strong shape. People shouldn't worry about their pensions. And we are making this decisions today about how to invest, not just to pay for the pensions tomorrow, because we got the money for tomorrow, but it's for the person who may be starting, you know, next week, next year, not too much hiring going on right now. Will we have the money for them 25, 30, 40 years from now? That's the way we have to look at it. So we're looking for those seeds of opportunity opportunity to invest money. And Doug, we're looking to do more investment here in New York State to be part of regrowing our own economy. We, of course, as pension investors, we need great deals. We're not economic development, we're not grants, we're not loans.
You have fiduciary
we have very important
responsibilities.
but I think there are many great opportunities here in New York State, and we want to take full advantage of that.
Okay, and in addition to all of that, you are responsible for reviewing and overseeing both the New York State and the New York City budgets as well.
Yeah, well, that oversight role certainly extends to looking at the budget, particularly with the state budget. We offer detailed commentary on the governor's proposal. We then, after the budget's enacted, also provide a detailed recommendation. And through the budget process, we'll weigh in. We have a role if the legislature and the governor can't agree on revenue. We are the ones that have to pick the revenue number by statute.
Agree on revenue?
You know, they have actually. You know, in years ago when the budgets were late, notoriously for months, often it was because they would never agree on revenue.
Right.
Then they changed the law about 3 or 4 years ago to say if you can't agree, the controller sets a number. So since then, they've been agreeing on time. So we'll see for this year.
They don't want you to decide.
They don't want, exactly.
Right.
They can only get worse.
The bean counter.
So by the beginning of March, if they don't do it, we do. And then you mentioned New York City. As an outgrowth of the New York City fiscal crisis of the 70s, we have a whole division within our agency that focuses on New York City. So we also comment on the city budget process as well.
Okay, now, what additional powers? You've got extensive governmental powers. What powers ought the Constitution grant the controller that you don't have now?
Ought the Constitution grant? Well, you know, I think our greatest strength is the credibility of the numbers that we put out. I don't think, you know, because the controller is one person, one office, you know, sometimes people say, well, you should be the one, you know, to have more say in the budget, and you should be the one to reject legislative proposals. But, you know, I'm a strong believer in grassroots democracy, and you know, we all elect a governor with key executive powers. In New York State, as you know, we have some of the strongest executive.
Absolutely.
People don't realize it's a very different role in New York than other states.
Oh,
a very powerful
role.
role.
You compare the chief executive of the state and the city of New York
and the city
to
also.
other jurisdictions.
Very, very strong.
Very strong executive.
All the more reason why I think that legislative role, which, you know, is often bashed, you know, in terms of how we bash them. We all don't like the legislature, but we like our legislator who we vote for.
Absolutely.
You know, the usual thing.
All the time.
All the time. But the legislative role and the legislative prerogative in setting policy, I think, is one that I respect. And I'm not looking as controller to supplant either the governor's authority or the legislature's authority. What I'd like to think is that we have strong institutional powers already, and let the credibility of our boards. You know, went back before the meltdown of 08, in 07, when we had a different governor, and the budget was put together, we put out a report that said the state is making spending commitments that are not sustainable.
Yeah.
We said that when we were flush with cash.
It was prescient. I mean, I reviewed all of these reports.
Now you could argue if the controller had more institutional power, we could have perhaps used some leverage to force some better behavior. Obviously, in 07, people didn't pay attention to what we were saying. In 08, suddenly everybody's saying we don't have enough. You know,
right,
but and Governor Patterson deserved credit because he has been out on front early on saying, you know what, we have a real problem. It's only going to get worse before it's better. This is a recession. We need to face it. And he's had a tough budget proposal. Mayor Bloomberg's got a tough budget proposal out there as well. But these leaders, I think, are calling it like it is. We can't run away from this problem. We can hope Washington's going to help us with the Obama
I want to talk about that in a bit. Okay, let's go.
But we can't count on it. That's going to be my main point.
Exactly. Please tell me about it. There's a lot of wishing and hoping in both the governor's budget and the mayor's budget. I mean, it reminds me of the old Dusty Springfield. Are you old enough to remember the old Dusty Springfield?
I love Dusty Springfield. Yes.
Okay.
Wishing and hoping and praying. And whatever.
Good. Do you sing? No, we don't want you to sing. Okay. My basic question now is both for the state budget and the city budget. Let's start with the state. How bad is it, and how bad will it get?
Well, you know, the revenues every time we've looked, you know, continue to drop, and the governor's proposal anticipated that.
Which was mid-December, right? December.
Well, which is earlier than required.
Right,
he said, "I'm going to give you an extra 6 weeks."
Yeah.
Okay. Which again was leadership. He put it all out. Now, not everybody liked what he put out there.
Excuse me, or listened to him, or
listen
did
to
anything.
But you know, as you know, they have come to an agreement on closing the gap
last week for this fiscal year. What was it?
$1.6 billion.
Right.
Which is not a lot compared to the big problem of the coming year, which is, you know, about $13 billion.
Yeah, and then this fix didn't involve any spending cuts. I mean, this was forget about low-lying fruit. The fruit was on the ground.
We're analyzing the detail. I mean, much of it was sweeping money out of you know, different accounts of money that had been sitting there that hadn't been spent,
which might have to be replaced.
Might have to be replaced at some time. You know, again, you know, looking at agencies for cost reductions. There is some impact on next year's budget. We think some of the estimates have been overstated, but they still have a $13 billion problem they've got to deal with for next year.
Without getting into the politics, what is the size of the deficit is huge. How do you address this? I mean, how does the governor address it, and how do you analyze how he's addressing it?
The governor, you know, laid out his plan in December and talked about the 2-year gap and put the highest priority, which I think was correct, on spending cuts. He had about $9.5 billion in spending cuts. About $3 billion were then in tax and fee increases, and the remainder were in, you know, one-shots. And we don't look kindly on the one-shots because it's not recurring revenue. But when you look at how other budgets have been balanced, I think Governor Patterson set the right set of priority, which is we have to deal with the spending side of the equation first and not rely on the one-shots. Now, you mentioned the wish and hoping before by the federal government. The way his plan has been structured, it doesn't incorporate federal money. So actually, whatever we do get can help, and hopefully timing-wise we'll know in advance of the April 1st deadline. I'm sure we will. It's not going to solve the problem, though. You're not going to get $13 billion, you know, to wipe us away. You know, Senator Schumer and the congressional delegation are talking about more money to help Medicaid. Health care is a big expense area. There's talk also about some money that can help with education. The other big expense area, you know, for the state. That's important because if the state can start to minimize some of the cuts that the governor proposed, you know, that impacts on the city budget. You know, we estimated $1 billion, you know, rough, probably a little higher, hit on New York City's budget. That's part of what Mayor Bloomberg's been having to contend with. And that drives
and he's doing a lot of wishing and hoping.
But also some tough medicine, you know, in terms of layoffs and cutting services. I mean, that's serious stuff. So,
well, he's threatening that. He's trying to force the state to say, no, return our education aid so we don't have to fire.
Well, and that puts the pressure on Washington to say, okay, you've got all the stimulus, don't leave us out, because if you can help us get through this, then that you know, that effect of the state cut, you know, it hurts the city and hurts other localities. It is, but it's like a puzzle all tied together. You know, it's
cat's
tough.
cradle. It's real tough.
And it's not going to be easy because look, the people in New York are used to quality services and they're very concerned. But I do think, Doug, it's an opportunity. It's hard to do it in a budget crunch time, but we shouldn't waste a crisis. It is an opportunity to start to say, all right, are we really doing this right? I think there are many areas where we've tried to encourage the discussion in this regard. We have great programs, great intentions, but you know, we do layer upon layer of program. Sometimes we lose sight of the efficiency of the program, and I think there have been a lot of proposals out there that need to be considered a little more seriously, so that long term we're not just cutting to get through you know, a budget in 1 year, but we're starting to right the ship, because we need to be smarter about how we spend money.
Yeah, but you're talking about systemic structural change.
Which is hard to do.
This is not, when you use those words, that's not usually synonymous with Albany in any way.
No, and most people eyes glaze over because it sounds wonky, and but I think we need to recognize that if we could start to, and the governor in his health care proposals particularly has started to say, get people out of the higher cost institutions. Get them, you know,
but wait a second, but then you have the Greater New York Hospital Association and the hospital workers having an ad where they've got a blind guy ripping the governor. So I mean, this is self-interest here. This is going to be bloody. But
it is bloody already. But you know, but those same interests are also willing to come to the table and say, you know, there are. I think what they're saying is some of what the governor's laid out there just doesn't make sense from their point of view. But the governor has said, you got a better idea, a better approach. Then let's talk about it. And I just hope that doesn't get lost in the heat of the ads. And we got a budget deadline, and everybody's getting ornery as happens. You know, when there's a lot of pressure.
I think real ornery.
Yeah, and this is going to be a tough one. But there's got to be the opportunity to say, all right, if there's a better idea, what is it? Because we can't make up the money. We're not the federal government. We can't print the money. And even with what the governor's doing, even if his plan was adopted exactly as is, with all the cuts and the tax and fee increase, because other people complain about the tax increase, the fee increase.
Absolutely.
You know, out years, you know, 3 years later, we're still going to be short probably about $11 billion.
So you got to make, and in one
we're
sense,
still going to be, even if we do it exactly as he's saying it, we'll get through this year. We're still going to have problems in the years to come unless this economy, you know, picks up dramatically.
So you really then have to, what I'm hearing from you is you've got to pare down what government does dramatically.
We have to change our expectations and be smarter about how we spend. Look, will New York State and New York City always have education as probably the top investment? Sure, and well it should. Well it should. Both for institutions like CUNY, public higher education, and K through 12. But we need to be smarter about it, and we need to think differently than we have in the past.
Okay. Let's go to this federal stimulus package for a second. I mean, it's like waiting for Godot, you know, and hoping he shows. In a sense, everything's frozen, just like everything in transportation was frozen with the Ravage Commission. We're just waiting and waiting and waiting. What's the reasonable expectation here? I mean, I know it's early and you don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, you know, I'm certainly not the expert on what's happening in Washington. My sense is, though, that President Obama still has that mandate. Right. And he still has the benefit of his party, the Democratic Party, being in control of the House and Senate, and everybody wanting us to do more than sitting around and wringing our hands about how bad it is. So I think the real question is, as they finalize it, you know, how much will it be in terms of direct support for states on programs like Medicaid and other ways to help? How much will be a more longer-term investment strategy, the infrastructure investments, which we could benefit from tremendously? You know, my concern there is that we've got some big projects that are out there. I think we should maximize our investments in terms of the greatest good for the greatest number. Tappan Zee Bridge is a prime example.
Oh, please.
For anybody in the state.
Excuse me. Absolutely.
$16 billion to replace it. We don't have any money for that. That would benefit everyone and certainly would create a lot of jobs.
And then the $18 billion for, you know, the MTA capital
is another
budget.
big one.
Come on.
Hunts Point Market. You know, we did a press conference there. The produce market, they're talking, don't take this the wrong way, they're talking about maybe going to New Jersey. We don't want them to go to New Jersey. We want
live
them to
in New Jersey.
Well, that's why I say don't take it the wrong way.
I don't want it, though. I'm in New York. I'm just temporarily residing there.
And it's not just the jobs in New York City. That is the focal point for marketing our agricultural products from all across New York State. They need some money too. That's a great event. So I know everybody's talking about shovel ready right now. We've got a lot of roads and smaller projects all across the state that are worthy. But I hope we don't miss the opportunity, and I'm sure whatever they do right now, there'll be other iterations of this. Those big projects, you know, think about the schools that many of us went to that were built, you know, with WPA money. We need to think big, not just a little local
We need an idea
project.
Infrastructure, and we need you know, a cyber infrastructure and a green infrastructure. We need all of those things.
And Obama's talked a lot about it. I mean, that whole area of green-collar jobs, and I think that's an area where New York State has great opportunities. We've set up, as part of our pension fund investments, $500 million to be set aside for clean technology investments. We have an in-state program. We would love to grow those green-collar jobs right here in New York State. We educate all these great young minds at our colleges and universities.
And both the SUNY and the CUNY
SUNY and CUNY, and we got strong privates, and they develop technologies and products, and they commercialize them somewhere else. We've got to figure out how we can have them commercialize and put their roots down in their corporate investments here in New York State and stay here.
Okay. I'm looking at this stimulus money, and I'm thinking methadone. What you're doing is you're providing a drug as you withdraw from another drug. Now, in a sense, doesn't the stimulus provide an out for the hard choices? I mean, you need it to survive, but doesn't it provide state and city officials an out so they don't have to deal with these structural issues?
Well, you know, it may provide an out, but it also helps us stabilize a very difficult situation. You know, I'm concerned about the person whose home is being foreclosed on, the person who's about to get the pink slip, and the impact of that, the family that had health insurance but now may have to go on Medicaid. I mean, you know, those are the people who I think that this is trying to help. And we certainly need, with unemployment continuing to grow, the unemployment office didn't have enough forms. The whole system crashed a couple of weeks ago. We need to have people back to work, and I think he's on the right track to suggest that, and I think particularly with the parts of the stimulus package that result with infrastructure enhancements, that's not going to help us balance our budget. That's just going to have people working again and giving us long-term improvements.
As it generates jobs with income, you can tax that. Let's talk politics and government. What's your working relationship, briefly, for example, with the Attorney General at the state level and Bill Thompson, the city controller? How do you interact with them? What's your relationship with them?
Certainly with Controller Thompson, we're on parallel tracks. We do a lot of work together. And I got to say to you, Doug, when I first got this position, you remember it was a very quiet, simple transition.
Oh, yeah.
When I became Controller. We'll do another show on that one day.
Yes.
One of the first people who reached out to me was Controller Thompson. And he said, look, whatever I can do to help you succeed. And he's been a great guy. We coordinate when we work on policy. We contacted mortgage originators and financial institutions to say, you've got to do something to avoid the foreclosures on people. And we've been using our leverage in that regard. We do corporate governance shareholder resolutions together as far as pension fund. We coordinate some of our investment strategies. So we do a lot.
And he worked with your predecessor as well.
Absolutely. Bill Thompson's just an outstanding public servant and a great controller, and would be great for other things too, I might add. Attorney General.
Is that an endorsement? That sounds like a mayoral endorsement. Yes, it does. Go ahead.
Bill Thompson's a great guy.
Go ahead. Talk about Andrew Cuomo.
Well, his office does different things than we do, but we have opportunities to coordinate. For example, Medicaid, big expense area, and we certainly need to be more efficient there. We coordinate with Attorney General Cuomo's office and the Office of Medicaid Inspector General because we do audits in that area as well. We've been working with him, on this issue of particularly attorneys and other professional titles inappropriately in our pension system should be independent contractors. He's been doing investigations of that. We've been doing that. So there are many areas where we work together.
Okay, last question. We got a minute and a half to go. 2010. You alluded to it earlier. You're running for the first time for the office. Right. You are one of the quote-unquote, no offense, accidental public officials, including the governor, a U.S. senator, you name it, they're accidental. Okay. What's interesting about your position is that it's a partisan position. You're going to run as a Democrat, and you're going to have opposition, but your mandate is to be nonpartisan in terms of what you do. How do you balance that?
It's hard. I mean, the good thing for me is my career in the legislature and growing up in a good Republican household is I was always pretty open to the other side.
Oh, good.
So, actually, in terms of our office working on the long-term view of things, it very much fits that. And I would like to see this office continue in that vein, particularly with regard to the campaign. I've been a strong advocate for public campaign financing for this office.
Absolutely.
Because I think this office of all should be the one we shouldn't have to go around begging for the dollars.
And you've had really stringent, much more stringent voluntary caps on fundraising than the law provides.
Yeah, well, because you need the money to run it. I'm a middle-class guy. I can't self-fund. I don't have a few $1 million.
Sure.
I don't have a famous name. I'm going to have to raise the money. But the worst part of this job is having to raise the money. And even the appearance of conflict, particularly for a controller, I think is something, to be concerned about. But the only way to take the money out of the system is to have public financing of the campaign so we don't have to go out and raise the money. So I'd like to see that happen.
10 seconds. Your campaign pitch in 2010.
Well, he came into an office that had a lot of ethical issues, and he straightened that out. And the office functions now with credibility and integrity and has been a part of positive change for making New York State government more efficient and more responsive to the needs of everyday New Yorkers.
You got my vote, even though I live in New Jersey. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.